Hello everyone out there in YouTube land. So today I'm talking about the first book in the Dune series. Certainly the book that most people are familiar with. There's a famous film by David Lynch, which I think is actually pretty good. If you haven't read the book though, the film is borderline incomprehensible. So I recommend you certainly read the book before you watch the movie, otherwise you'll have no clue what's going on. Especially because Dune is such a complex and intricate book. So, for the uninitiated, Dune is all about world building, which is, kind of a crutch now, I think, for some writers of both books and comic books, is they're too focused on the world building and not enough on the story. But if you look in the back of a copy of Dune here, you'll see that it's like a dictionary. And in the back of every copy, you'll find, maps, much like ones you'd find in The Lord of the Rings. But they have dictionaries in the back because the terms, and there's so many people, and the terminology is incredibly unique. And the first time I read this when I was like 13, I constantly referred to the back dictionaries. I mean, constantly, because I was always forgetting what this was or what that was, and I hadn't seen the movie, and I wasn't familiar with the story and stuff like that, so it took me a little while to get adjusted to it. I'm very thankful that glossary, we'll call it, that glossary was in the back. When I read books 2 and 3 and stuff like that, I would often refer back to it in the first book. When I read this paperback copy of it, but I had also been gifted this by my mother for Christmas, and I would look at the pictures in it. So the reason I didn't read this copy is its size was kind of prohibited, and its shape kind of made it annoying, whereas this was much more compact and much more easy to carry and stuff like that. Especially I was, at that point carrying my backpack. The art in this is really good, and it's got a 70s vibe. I don't know who the illustrator is in this. I've never heard of him, but maybe somebody has. He's probably done other stuff in the comments. But yeah, it's got a real 1970s vibe, and I really, really like it. Weird looking stuff. Overall, one of the joys was, I would read along in this copy, and then I would refer to this copy for the pictures. So spoiler warning when I talk about the plot here. I'm going to probably say the entire plot, or at least the basics of it. So Paul Atreides is the son of a duke. His father is, the duke of the planet, I believe it's Caladan, and they're being shuffled by the Emperor. So that his family is going to uproot from their current planet that they oversee and move to this planet called Arrakis, which nickname is Dune. It's a desert planet. It's basically Tatooine. It's like Tatooine, but even more harsh and inhospitable, because if you're outside, you really have to wear a special suit that reclaims your water. And on Dune, water is the most precious commodity. I mean, water is the end-all be-all, because it's extremely rare to find. You have to recycle your water, or you have to kind of like farm it through wind traps, the same way that Luke Skywalker lived on the Lars homestead, that, they had moisturizing, or not moisturizing, but moisture collectors and stuff like that to farm. So Dune is certainly a big influence, I believe, on Star Wars, and I think George Lucas would probably say that out loud. There's this other rival family, which is, I call them the Harkonnen family. Some people say the Harkonnen family, but the Harkonnen family, which is sort of like the evil equivalent to Paul and his family. So they're out to destroy Paul and his father and the dukedom and stuff like that, and the corrupt Harkonnens cut a deal with the Emperor to kind of do away with it. So after Paul and his parents moved to Dune, there's an invasion by the Harkonnens, and then also the Emperor sends disguised troops, and his troops are called, they're from Solus Secundus, and I forget what they're called. Man, I really, really should remember that. Either way, the Emperor sends his troops, and they're disguised, and they obliterate the Duke, and Paul manages to escape with his mother, and they end up in the care of what are the Fremen, and they're basically desert nomads. And these people are adapted to the harsh desert environment. So they survive on their own, and they're amazing fighters, and they're incredibly resourceful. So something I didn't really talk about in my themes video, which I encourage you to watch. Please refer back to it. Let me know what you think and if there's any themes I left out. But is one of the things that I greatly admire and is kind of a theme, especially throughout the first book, and then it's sort of shifted on its head in the later books, but is the Freeman's, I call them the Fremen, right? But they're basically like, think of it like free man, because they just wander around and they're completely free. But the Fremen's capacity for self-sacrifice. So because of the harsh desert climate and because of water just being so precious, and you need so much water to survive, they have a capacity for self-sacrifice. So if you're old and you can't take care of yourself, they'll basically kill you, and they'll harvest your water, and they'll give it back to the tribe. And the Fremen put the good of the group, so the good of their tribe, before the individual, very much so. And you see that throughout the book. They talk about different things. A Fremen tradition about a blind man is going to play a big role in the second book, and we'll talk more about that when we get to the second book. But yeah, their capacity for self-sacrifice and being raised in this inhospitable climate. And being raised in the inhospitable climate already makes them really good soldiers. So that's part of the thing. So the Emperor's, they're called Sardaukar, now I remember. The Emperor Sardaukar, which is the Emperor's personal soldiers, come from his prison planet, which is Solus Secundus, which is supposed to be just incredibly inhospitable. But Dune is even worse than that, it turns out. And so it predisposes the people who live there, the Fremen, to be amazing soldiers. And then Paul had all this formal training. He comes, the Fremen sort of, see him as a savior, and they give him, a name. They call him Moabdib. And Moabdib, Paul becomes Moabdib and eventually trains all these Fremen in the way to fight with swords and knives and daggers and stuff like that. And I know it's a futuristic thing, but he has this really cool plot device. So Herbert, does a wonderful job building the world. And part of his world is some of the unique things that technology brings about. One of them is people wear shields. So they're sort of like this... they're shields. Just think of them as shields, like electronic shields that you press a button and the shield turns on. It covers your entire body. It deflects fast-moving things like projectiles, and there are laser guns in the future. They're called las guns, but when a las gun hits a shield, it has a reaction, and it can run the gambit from just killing the two people. So the person who's wearing the shield and the person who fires, they can die in a small explosion, or the explosion can be the size of like a nuclear bomb going off. And so nobody likes to wear shields around las guns because they're afraid it's basically going to be like setting off a nuclear bomb. So people fight hand to hand with swords and daggers and stuff like that, like in olden times. Paul is an amazingly trained son of a duke, so he has this amazing swordsmanship and skills and stuff like that, and he teaches it to the Fremen, and that's, that makes the Fremen go from being amazing soldiers to the best soldiers in the galaxy. So eventually, the Harkonnens oust the Atreides family, that's Paul's family, Moabdib's family. They oust them, they take over the planet Dune, they rule it very corrupt. One day the Emperor comes, and spoiler alert, because I'm going to ruin the end of it, Paul eventually leads a charge, and he manages to sort of capture the Emperor. So his Fremen fight, they defeat the Sardaukar, which are the Emperor's troops, and they take over basically the Empire. Paul tells the Emperor, hey, listen, I'm taking over the Empire, I'm going to marry your daughter, and he ends up marrying the daughter, but also having a concubine who he met in the Fremen group. Amazing book. If that was confusing, it is confusing. As confusingly as I said it, don't expect to be confused by the book. Herbert's an amazing author. He somehow makes this much easier to follow than I just did. Again, though, if you have not read the book, don't watch the David Lynch film. Even though the film is very great, visually striking, there are some differences between the book and the movie, but the movie will be borderline incomprehensible if you have not read the book. The book is just wow. So, the world building is so amazing, and what I like about it too is, he leaves some gaps. He doesn't try to create a 100% fleshed out world. So there's a theme that runs throughout the entire series about the rise and fall of empires. And you sort of get the feeling, based on some things that are said and some things that are done, that the Imperium and the Emperor are in decline. They're overly decadent, they're weak, they're not as strong as they used to be, and they're having a lot of problems. And so you have these Fremen who are so, so strong, independent, but also group-minded, who come and are able, they're basically just poor nomads who are able to conquer an entire empire through skill and sacrifice and an amazing leader. So there's that sort of rise and fall of empires. Now, Dune is very much about the building of Paul / Moab Dib's empire, and the later books will kind of chronicle how that empire is governed and sort of the oscillations in it. So sometimes it's in a rising action, sometimes it's in a falling action. But Dune sets the groundwork for that. Overall, not just one of the best sci-fi books I've ever read, but one of the best books I've ever read. It probably is my favorite of the entire saga, but in later videos I'm going to talk about why, even though the first one is my favorite, I think you should read all 6 of them, at least all 6 written by Frank Herbert. Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And I can't do the world building justice. I'm sure I probably made it really difficult to follow the plot, but Dune is, it's definitely one of the 10 books you should read before you die. I think so. So yeah, definitely pick up Dune, check it out. I'm going to be having videos talking about the other 5 books in the series that are less well known. Again, this one's pretty iconic. I assume if you're watching this, you probably read the book. Like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know, what are some of your favorite things about Dune? Is the first novel your favorite the way it is mine? Or do you like one of the other ones better?